Okay. Monique, if you can start sharing your screen so long, that would be great. I will unmute you and then I'll do a quick introduction before you get started. So, great. So let me give you a lovely introduction to Monique. We're so thrilled to have you here today. I know you spoke at one of our IAB Insights sessions earlier this year on trends in the digital economy. I think we all know that feels like a lifetime ago. So we're very interested to hear the new insights today. So introducing Monique Claassen. Monique heads up the media and digital practice for Kantar South Africa. She brings over 17 years of experience in delivering actionable insights from numbers, and her knowledge in complex media projects coupled with her insatiable appetite for digital trends, development and thinking. And Monique helps her clients make the best decisions to deliver the greatest return on media investments. And that's what we're here to discuss today, is what is the new normal in media. Monique's digital research experiences stretches across online, including search, display, video, and website optimization, the magic mix, mobile advertising and marketing, and social media content evaluation. Monique has a deep understanding of the African environment, working across 17 different African countries. So if you thought you were busy, I guess, Monique, you win. You're the busiest. That's crazy. And multiple industries, including FMCG, finance, alcohol, automotive, quick service restaurants, retail, telecommunications, media publishing, and service categories. So thank you, Monique. Welcome. And I'm handing over to you. And then we'll be joined by our guest from Sheesh Williams from Mediacom in a bit. Thanks, Monique.
Good morning, everyone, and thanks so much for giving us some of your time. I know that everyone is inundated with webinars and thought pieces, and so thank you so much for joining us this morning. I'm really excited to share some of the insights that we have curated over the course of the last couple of months, and really looking at different media behaviors and how sticky the current trends are. So I've got the first slide that says the new normal, and personally I hate that term because I think that I refuse to believe this is our new normal. I think it's quite abnormal, and somewhere down the line we will return to a different way of being and a different way of working. But right now, this is not the new normal. It's just the new normal as we know it right now. So I suppose one of the key things around media trends and habits and changes, and we'll take you through some of those insights, is the fundamentals still remain the same, right? Are we getting to more people, or are we actually reaching the same person more often? And whilst we have seen lots of data which showcases, how consumer behaviors are changing over this time period, what we do see is that the number of consumers claiming to engage with different media hasn't changed that dramatically. So the same number of people are engaging. We do see shifts, however, with online. So we're getting a little bit more people that are engaging with email, websites, internet, and social media networks. And obviously, we do see a decline in printed newspapers and magazines. And online streaming of radio has also declined over the period of the last 2 months. So all this data is taken from the Kantar Barometer. It's a survey of 500 people every second week, looking at media habits and behaviors, and also their general sentiments over the pandemic. So when we look at the heartbeats of our consumers, and we can see that things haven't really changed that much in terms of the number of people, and that the number of people that are interacting or engaging with different platforms. You can see that TV, instant messaging apps, online video, we're seeing the number of people relatively stay the same. However, what we are seeing is lots of people doing a lot more, spending a lot more time across different media touchpoints. So you can see in early March, the average increased consumption across all media touchpoints was just on 24%. And by the start of May, that was actually 38%. So this is really interesting, not just because consumers are engaging with more platforms, but it's very important to note when we come to planning for campaigns and media planning frequency is so important for us to look at, especially across platforms, because the chances of overextending frequency and getting to wear out is actually that much more prevalent right now, given the sheer amount that consumers are engaging with platforms. So what's driving the consumption frequency at the start of May? Again, this is looking at consumers' behavior changes in terms of what they are saying they're doing more of. Now, we've looked at this over every 2 weeks. And you can see by a long stretch that digital platforms have really taken up in terms of consumers claiming they're spending a lot more time. Everything from social networks right through to streaming music and podcasts. We do see that TV is still holding strong, so 53% increase in viewing TV. And we do see that newspapers and magazines are down. However, what I thought was really interesting to share is this slide. So what we're looking at here is we're looking at the start of March, just before lockdown began, versus the last 2 weeks and beginning of May. So the gray bar is the start, and then the gold bar is towards the end of April. And here you can see before the lockdown started, newspapers and magazines were actually garnering their fair share of increased readership. However, as the lockdown has continued, we do see that is trailing off quite a bit. However, we also know that consumers are not stopping their need for news. They're just turning to digital platforms. So when we look at the narrative reports over March, you can see the increased traffic on news sites. So 140% on News24, 72% Citizen, 51% EWN, 44% on Times Live. So behavior is just changing in terms of where consumers are getting their news from. And it could also be that, with limited travel during lockdown, that actually going out to buy a daily newspaper is not something that consumers are currently doing. We also know, however, that all media behavior is not one size fits all. So what I've pulled out here from the Kantar barometer is some of the major age skews that we see. So if a particular media touchpoint is not on this chart, it means that there is no real significant skew in terms of age. So when we do look at things like social networks and podcasting, and email and TV on demand, you can see that older consumers are actually trailing behind younger consumers. And when we look at newspapers, again, you can see that older consumers and age 35 plus are really engaging with newspapers. You can also see that the age 35 plus group are still engaging a lot more with radio. So again, these figures, just as a reminder, this is the increase. So this is where consumers have said they claim to be consuming more of this particular media touch point than they were previously. So again, massive increases for TV and radio coming through quite strongly. But of course, we do see a lot more consumption within digital platforms. And because, we look at broad-based net sums on the previous slides, we wanted to really break down the different types of digital touch points that consumers claim to be engaging more with. Not surprising, we see WhatsApp, we see a lot of YouTube coming through, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and then we've even got House Party that we started tracking in the last 2 waves of the research. You can see that is even trending up. So a lot of increased digital consumption happening throughout. Again, what is really interesting to note here is the frequency. So when we are planning a campaign with so much consumption, you need to really make sure that you're monitoring those frequency caps in not only just one particular platform, but across the board. I also added this chart in just to show that for the most part, whilst consumers are definitely consuming a lot more digital, what we've seen in our Kantar Connect database is that the behavior of viewing ads hasn't really changed. So we've looked at a whole bunch of studies that we did before COVID struck versus during COVID. And you can see that the skip rate on YouTube in our database is very similar, and Facebook is very similar. So it's not as though consumers have completely stopped watching ads. Their behavior in terms of engaging with ads hasn't really changed. So again, what is important to note on this slide is whilst lots of things have changed, some things stay the same. And also here, as always, it's really, really important to make sure that the content that you have in these platforms and the creative that you have is really cut through. And if you joined one of the previous sessions that we ran with IAB, Natalie Buerta, who's our head of creative, had an entire presentation around the types of creative content that you should be thinking about and how you should be curating creative. So I would urge you to go have a look at that recording. Some really, really great insights there. So here, in summary, I guess we've looked at some of the changes in behavior. It's not really surprising that we see a lot more consumption coming through and that there's a lot more digital coming through. So what does this mean exactly for media planning? What should we be doing? How should brands be navigating this? What is this magic bullet? Is there a magic bullet for recovery? How long are these trends going to stay like this? So here I'm going to take a little bit of a detour into some of our Kantar global databases and insights that we've pulled, just to put behavior changes that we are seeing right now into context. So I think if we look at some of the other pandemics, or not quite pandemics, but outbreaks that has happened, or disasters that have happened, we can see that SARS in Japan and in South Korea, there was obviously a point of disaster, but over time, there has been recovery. We just don't know how long that recovery is going to take. And of course, this pandemic is not the same. It has far wider global implications. It is completely different to anything that we have seen before. But I think the keynote here is that recovery does happen. When we take it a little bit closer to home, and here we're looking at a chart around global ad trade from WARC, and we can see that the 2008 recession, we saw ad investment dip to just on negative 6.4%. And in real time, it took 8 years for the industry in terms of total ad trade to recover. So if we think that that took 8 years to recover, and 2019, the prediction is that we're actually going to be hit harder, we can understand that in terms of advertising spend, things are definitely going to be different. But one of the things that isn't different, it's not just around how much you invest behind your brand. It's not just on advertising spend. The one thing that we absolutely know for sure is that strong brands are able to recover, and they are able to return back to growth 9 times faster than the average brand. So the slide that you're looking at here, again, looks at the 2008 recession versus different tiers or layers of information. In the light blue, right on top, you have our global brandsy top most powerful brands. And you can see that their average return after the recession is 3 times higher than an average brand. If you look at the top 100 brands in the Brandsy portfolio, the turquoise color, you can see that again, that's 1.9 times higher or quicker return in terms of ROI versus the S&P 500 and then versus the MSCI index. So again, whilst the S&P 500 you can see does return eventually, as all markets do, brands that are really strong and strong, powerful brands bounce back that much quicker. So when you are looking at your media and you are looking at your advertising and you're thinking about where to pull spend and what to do, there's a couple of things that I really want to impart in terms of insights and things to keep in mind. The very first thing is, although internal budgets might be under pressure, 99% of South Africans still want to hear from brands. They say they still want to see advertising. The key thing here, though, is it's about what you advertise. So really, consumers feel that brands shouldn't be exploiting the current situation. So it's not about pulling all advertising and not talking to consumers at all. They do want to hear from you. And we know that you have to invest in your brand, because current budgets or lower budgets, we know that there are opportunities to look at media investments. So any company that does any sort of econometric modeling will know that there's an opportunity to actually deliver greater ROI with less investment or similar budgets. And this is taken from our Kantar Analytics database, where we can see that there's a 17% ROI growth based on brands that actually invest 10% less on their campaigns. So if you have current data sets, we know that there are systems in place that you can look at how to optimize. So basically what this chart says is that there's room to garner 17% more ROI based on lower budgets. So it's not all completely hopeless, and it's not all complete doom and gloom. For all marketers and advertisers out there, you can cut spend, you can optimize ROI without actually damaging brand ROI overall. Another key learning that I pulled from our database is that this is based on sales, so actual sales and return. And here we can see that if we look at sales overall, like the whole sales bubble, 13% of sale contribution is based on media investment. Because there's a lot of other factors, right, that impact sales. Pricing, distribution, availability. If you're ice cream, it might be the weather. If you're a cold and flu brand, it might be seasonal. So there's a lot of other things that would impact sales ROI. And we know that on average, it's around 13%. However, if we include the brand, so the strength of your brand into that, you can see that explains 28% of overall sales. So again, investing behind your brand and making sure that your brand has the right architecture and the right identity, and that you are positioning your brand in the right way, however you may do that, whatever media investment you choose, or whatever touchpoint investment you choose, building brand is the one thing that is going to set you apart from your competitors. So what we look at is, or I suppose what we want to remind everyone of, is to not have a complete knee-jerk reaction in the short term. We know that media investment and upping or lowering that really does have an impact on sales. But we also know that equity and the strength of your brand and the types of messages you have out there really also have an impact on overall investment. So we would urge you to balance the short term and the long term. Whatever your media budgets are, however much they're being cut by, this is something that you shouldn't lose sight of. Because we know that those strong brands are the ones that recover 9 times faster. So we want you to think about total market return on investments, not just the rands and cents that you're spending on paid for media. There's so much more around your brand. So everyone who is trying to justify those marketing budgets, remember to justify them in terms of growing brand and maintaining your brand strength and positioning in the market. The last couple of slides I have is that all channels, and this is from our cross-media database, when we take reach out of the equation, and we are looking at reaching the right person with the right message. So we see that all media touchpoints actually can deliver on brand. All media touchpoints have the ability to drive brand awareness, brand positioning, and brand consideration and usage. And that's motivation on the slide. So whether you invest in Facebook or digital display or radio or TV, all creative and all advertising spend has the ability to drive brand. Obviously, this needs to be weighed up with reach. So are we reaching the right number of consumers? Because once we reach them in a particular channel, all channels have the ability to deliver that ROI. And linking back to what we said earlier around the consumption, the sheer consumption of media, it has never been more important to look at multimedia and synergy. Again, from our database, we can see that the biggest synergy lies between TV and digital platforms. Digital platforms drive incremental reach at a far more cost-effective rate, and we also see that the synergy of those channels really drive overall brand ROI. And the last thing is that whatever you do, again, however small your budgets are, make sure that your creative is integrated to the whole campaign and customized for all of the channels. Even very small media budgets and creative budgets, this is something key that we need to keep in mind. Start with a central idea, make sure that we're designing for the platform, because for every person that we do reach, we want to make sure that they have a great experience with our campaign and that they really understand that brand positioning. And that's it from me. So I suppose in closing, we have three things that we would like to leave you with. So plan for recovery. The first one is current media consumption, the way it is now, is not going to be sustained. So review the systems that you have in place within your business. Think about how you can forecast demand, how you can allocate budgets differently, because we know that a 10% decline on a media budget can still offer 17% additional ROI. So there is an opportunity to certainly cut back and to certainly optimize budgets within a plan. Also, we need to prepare for the resurgence of out-of-home, cinema, and activations. Although we're in level 3 lockdown now, I suppose this talks more about when we go into lighter levels of lockdown as well. Out of home, especially now in this period, we really feel that digital out of home is going to offer brands a real opportunity to connect with consumers, especially being able to change creative fluidly. So again, balance both the short-term brand performance. It is good to chase sales in the short term, but it's also important to make sure that you are building your brand and maintaining the equity of your brand in the long term. And the last, and I think most important thing with any media strats today is that you have to think about overall fatigue. Consumers are consuming 34% more media than they were previously, which means that chances are there's 34% more frequency on all your campaigns than there were previously. So really think about synergies, think about consumer behavior and synergies and maximizing overall budgets with that in mind. And that's it from me.
Brilliant. Thank you, Monique. Wow, you managed to get so many insights and statistics to us in such a sort of well-packaged manner, and we really appreciate it. I think all the Kantar sort of these episodes in the series have been, not only do they work so strongly on their own, but they actually work so strongly in sequence. And I've got quite a few people on the chat just asking about those, because you've mentioned obviously Natalie Buerta's creativity session, and All those presentations are available on the Kantar website, and we'll be sharing the link in the thank you mail. So don't worry, everyone, you will be able to access those presentations if you missed them, as well as the online, the Zoom webinars, the video recordings. And I think, Monique, just to maybe highlight some of the points that we're hearing here is that, I think, it is brand first. And if you've done the hard work up to this point, that's certainly going to pay off. In terms of having a strong brand that resonates authentically with its audiences. If you're still building your brand at the moment, an even stronger call to action to get the, like you say, the architecture correct, and to make sure that you're laying the right foundation before you build anything on top of that. And then I think, secondly, looking at that digital opportunity probably more so than ever, because never has it been more important to be able to use geographic location targeting or getting your targeting right, understanding sequential creative messaging because of the duration of time that people are online, and they don't want to see the same thing over and over. So how can you help them on their journey, to partner with your brand? And then fantastically, and I think we'll get to it in the questions later, around increasing your ROI, but not necessarily always through spend. And you had some great insights in there that I think people are really going to want to maybe ask a little bit about later. And I think we're probably all watching fatigue as Wednesday sets in and it feels like Sunday. I think there's lots to learn all around. But thank you, Monique, and for always being so energized. And we'll touch base with you in a few minutes after Ashish's presentation. So without further ado, so thanks, Monique. I'm going to unmute Ashish. Welcome. Oops, there we go. And wait, Ashish. Have I unmuted you? Not, because I can't hear you. 1 second. I have lost my, sorry about this, hold on. Luckily everything's alphabetical in the, 1 second. And Ashish, can't be hard to find since you begin with the letter A. There we go. Hopefully we can hear you now. Welcome, Ashish.
Yes.
And thanks for getting your presentation ready and video on. Just before you start, I've got a quick introduction. I'm sure most people know you in this forum as the CEO of Mediacom. And I mentioned earlier that you're also double tasking, and I'm sure triple tasking. I know you also work with the AMF board, and you're the head of the IAB South Africa Research Council chair. So thank you always for everything that you do to drive the industry forward. A quick intro. Ashish gained extensive and in-depth experience in regions such as India, China, and APAC, as well as South Africa, working with global and leading blue chip companies. And I think if we look at Mediacom's portfolio, I think it certainly resonates there. Digital transformation has always been at the heart of everything you do. And that's because you pride yourself on being ahead of the curve. And I think we can see that, in so many of our conversations. And thank you again for speaking at our Insights session, on the digital landscape only a month ago. Also feels like quite a while ago. So thanks for being with us again today. I think what's also very important is the fact that you've worked in all these different countries and worked with various cultures. It's given you a really unique perspective and skill set. And I really love this, and I see it consistently in all your communication, just in terms of your belief in a people first, better results model. So thank you for being with all of us people here today, and we look forward to hearing your insights on media at this time of crisis. Thanks, Ashish.
Thank you. Thanks, Paula, for such kind words. Hello, everyone. And I really kind of try to keep the same enthusiasm which Monique has showed. So let me try. And most of the stuff which you guys are going to find out is maybe re-emphasizing the same point which Monique has spoken about from an insight standpoint. So without further ado, let me talk about the new normal and the recovery phase which we are in. So if you look at the chart, what we are going through is actually, we can define the consumer impact at each level by analyzing 3 factors, right? So on the left-hand side, if you look at the screen, the scale. So new normal, recovery, and outbreaks. So in the last 2 months, we were in the outbreak stage where we were level 5, level 4, and now we are in the level 3, which we call it as a recovery stage. And as we go down the level, it will be the new normal for us. But what's happening is that there is a paradigm shift which is happening in each of the stages. And this is quite unique, definitely in my experience. And the stuff which I read around, that this kind of behavioral change happens in the human history not many times. So one of the changes which we have seen is the advent of the technologies, and the most important one was the when the electricity got discovered, right? So that kind of separated our sleeping habits and the way we used to do our activities. And the next big one was actually the innovation around mobile devices, which again changed our behavior. But this is, I would say, one of those situations which has really kind of upside down our landscape. And if you look at it from a needs and attitude angle, within the span of 2 or 3 months, actually, the things have changed. So when we were in the outbreak stage, we were having and talking about functional and emotional needs. And now we are in the recovery stage. We are talking about health, well-being, and safety, which is, of course, we know that it builds the immunity. And as we go into the new normal in some time, we will be talking about now and what is the future for us and what is the new normal. So, and this kind of impacts our behavior, where we ourselves, including me, reprioritizes our category purchases, essentials versus non-essentials. And now when we are in the recovery phase, we are talking about online versus offline, trying to limit our exposure into the shopping malls or anywhere else. So we are looking for online deliveries of certain goods, and if it is available. So a lot of switch which is happening from offline to online purchase. And again, the fact is that what is immediate versus long term, and consumers are giving a hard decision to this thing, is how do what we can push long term and what we are required to purchase now. And therefore, media consumption, so changes in the channel share and the time spent, which you have seen what Monique has spoken about. So that's kind of a drastic change there. And but one size fits all does not work. So I just want to emphasize that fact, is that different age groups or different segments of the society are reacting to the media in a very, very different way. If you try to focus on specific platforms or specific channels. So there's a relative impact for different audiences. So with this, what we are seeing is, again, people are expecting, the consumer are expecting for the brands to be pragmatic and offer down-to-earth support. Use the same Kantar barometers. What we have seen is that in the 6 messages which the brands are taking, what we found out is that which one is the most associated in terms of low to medium to high stringency. And if you look at the graph from a messaging point of view, which is attack the crisis and demonstrate that it can be fought, to all the way on the right-hand side, which is be optimistic and think in an unconventional way. So the most important part is actually to be practical and realistic and help consumers in their everyday life. That's the most relevant, which we can see to and resonates with the consumers. And guess what? What we are seeing globally as well as in South Africa, over 30% of the people have switched to the brands which have been practical and have been resonating with them and continuously talking to them during this outbreak. So again, it re-emphasizes the point of what Monique was saying, is that talking to the consumer, but in a very practical, in a very realistic way, and not really exploiting the situation. So if you look at it in a slightly different way as well, is that brands which have been reluctant to say or do something, people actually want to hear. And again, it's from a global web index where you can see South Africa, over 80% of the South African approve of advertising in response to outbreak. And on the left-hand side of the chart, it tells you that over a long term, where brands have been investing in the media. I know we are harping on investing in the media, but we have seen time and again before crisis and similar, not a similar crisis, but when such behavioral change phenomena has occurred in our human history, the brands who have continuously pumped up the investment and communicated with the consumers, they have really gathered the momentum with their consumers and are able to gain back in a much more faster way than the brands who have not been advertising. So what I would say is that while these investments are there, but the question comes around, how do we go about it? And I think this is where the gist of the slide is about looking at 7 principles. So first is prepare a differentiated plan for the upcoming battle, because this battleground is not the same. It's a very, very different battleground. And when brands from all categories try to occupy limited the consumer's mind space, that's what is going to happen. I think you have to think about very smart tactics about reaching to the consumers. In your portfolio, identify categories which are relevant, and put the media investment behind them. And if you have to make a choice, then the third part is build a new media mix and take stock of the situations, because we will be moving into the new normal, where you can have a provision and consideration for outdoor, the cinema, and live events. Of course, right now it will be caution, but try to create that, because you are going to change it quarter by quarter, your media plans and your investment mix. Now it's not the time to commit everything for next 1 year, because I must tell you that things are going to change every 2 months in terms of the behavior. Again, emphasizing the point on 4, which is about activate different marketing tools to analyze. I think that from a data stream angle, your analytics team becomes more important than ever. Look at the social tools, look at the listening, what people are talking about, look at your CRM, connect with the consumers, because more than ever, you need to find a unique and a different way of connecting with your consumers. And now there is a wealth of data and tools which are there. So please use that to segment your consumers and accordingly reach out to them. Address new medias and priorities in digital content, which is very, very important. So what we are seeing is that if you look at the usage, definitely has gone up of some of the platforms like digital and television. And the usage has not gone drastically up from a reach angle, but more from a frequency angle, because the time spent which we are doing is pretty high. And what happens is that if you are just moving the budget from television to digital, you can't survive the communication on just one creative. You need to have a lot of creative variation, otherwise it will become a blind spot in consumers' mind. So start using the technologies like a dynamic creative optimization, which are rule-based creative designs, and can throw up quite a few variation or hundreds of variations in a split of seconds. So start using the technology into your marketing plan. SEO. Rance wants to know where you are. You should not be ranking on the page 3 of your Google searches. So look at the brands, which look at how you can be in the page 1 with the right words and what you are and what your brand stands as a positioning, right? And what it is offering. So SEO becomes quite a few disciplines which we were not focusing before, but now more than ever it becomes very important. And of course, in the point 6, look at the health and wellness connections in your messaging, and stay positive with the tonality and enthusiasm with consumers. I'm going to talk about some of the case studies, some of the brands, how they have explored. But before that, I would again talk about the left side of the scale, which is about from outbreak to the new normal. If you are in the mix, we have seen like television where the ratings in the outbreak stage went through the roof, and there wasn't actually much difference between the prime time and the daytime because the consumptions was pretty high. But what we will be seeing is that the consumption of the daytime, as the work returns and the people return back to the offices, the prime time will still be now a very big chunk of the rating as compared to the daytime. And therefore, you can start looking at prime time ratings and things like that. Again, as I said about the outdoor formats, start considering now between home, school, and the office. So which we recommended actually not to spend any money in the outbreak stage. Now's the time to actually start slowly going back here. And most of all, digital, yes, what we will be seeing is that, yeah, there might be reduction in spends on the digital, but yes, the key aspect about time spent on recreating content and which will be now replaced with the news, socials, and the video. So you can look at those variation in terms of making a better ROI. So these are the things which I'm talking about, that how your media plan or your strategies needs to change quarter by quarter with baseline. And I get a lot of questions, on other where I speak around is some of the businesses, or quite a few of the businesses, are actually looking at that they do not have the demand surge, or they have a huge demand surge and have an unlimited supply. This is the best time for you then, where you have a demand and you have an unlimited supply. If you are in a business where demand is high but you have supply challenges, that can be the second thing about your situation. And the third is about where there is no demand and there is no supply. So what you should do, and do you still should be investing in media? The answer is no, because if you look at the reach, relevance, and reaction, these are the three things which we have to keep in mind from a connection standpoint, because you need to connect with your consumers. So what happens if you are in an unlimited demand and unlimited demand surge? So you can, of course, go and invest, maintain your SOV, maintain and increase your spends to deliver appropriate content, which is around relevance and reaction. So you should be doing. However, if there is a supply challenges, then start focusing more on the relevant side of things rather than reach, and kind of maintain yourself in the reaction stage of the communication. If you look at if you do not have the demand, you do not have the you have a supply constraint. Focus more on the reaction rather than the relevance and reach. So this is my investment guidance for you if you are in one of those choices or one of the situations which you are in, and you need to make the choices from a media investment standpoint. This is some of the examples which we have now I'll be talking about, where we have really explored with brands. So Savannah virtual comedy, one of the best ways to activate, right? Leveraging the consumer insight. And this is something which I spoke to you about before, is how do we leverage these consumer insights, which where people are spending time at their home. Savannah brought a virtual comedy bar online, where we know people are spending time, they are looking for content, and one of the best comedy celebrities which were brought in and was a show where you have a virtual bar comedy happening. Again, this is like continuously reaching out to your consumer, not directly exploiting the situation, but in a way which is very, very subtle, but dovetails into the communication and being relevant, right? So Savannah has done a fantastic job here. The other brand which I would like to talk about is Shell. If you look at the outdoors, the way they have gone about contextualizing the messaging, where they talked about the Shell stations will remain open to serve you. Again, very relevant messages about staying safe and talking about to the communities what they are doing. So they talked about the snack on us, available to all emergency staff on duty. These are the brands which are actually taking a stance and finding innovative use of the mediums and staying still relevant. If you look at the other brands, I'm sure you would have seen these case studies where brands like Coca-Cola actually, for the first time ever, they have spaced out their Coca-Cola as a brand name, and staying apart is the best way to stay united. And the same what Audi has done. So very, very powerful brands and taking powerful positioning with the COVID impact and what the phase which we are going in around it. That was more on the outdoor side of things. Look at the IKEA. I really like this example which happened in Russia. It's one of our brands. Is IKEA Russia, what they did, we know that it's really handful to manage the kids at home, right? And very nice insight. The campaign featured a series of instructions on how to create dens, forts, and tents of furniture and household items to transform into magical hideaways. How beautiful it is, right? In terms of creating this thing and being relevant and still being, if from a lockdown perspective, people can't go and buy furniture, but a very, very powerful way of messaging and being relevant to the consumers. Lego, which we know have always been has always been stood for the hero, right? And they really communicated in their channels on digital, which is about everyone in Britain can be a hero simply by using the superpowers of staying home, protecting our NHS, and saving lives. Very important and relevant messages which we have seen in the brands in South Africa and across the world. So I know we have still some time left, but I would actually use it more for questions and answers. But that's pretty much for me. I have lots and lots of slides, and please feel free to ask questions, and I'll be happy to give any responses. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ashish. That was great, and some very jam-packed slides. If you didn't manage to get a photo of those sort of call-outs and proposals, they'll certainly be shared in the thank you mail, and of course this webinar, the Zoom video, will be shared in that thank you email as well. So don't worry if you didn't get everything. Thank you, Ashish. I think you know, as this seems to be happening to us, certainly in our generation for the first time, you know, we can look back at, you know, previous instances and try and garner learnings from that time. I suppose with digital exponentially increasing the opportunity to work differently, I suppose it is quite a new space again, even if we can look back at the learnings. And then how do we take these learnings and develop an understanding of any insights or patterns that we can, you know, archive, doc, learn, in case we have to go, you know, back a phase or forward a phase. Hopefully not. Hopefully we're just heading straight for phase one and back to normal. I think the other thing that came up, you know, time and time again, and I think everyone's heart probably resonates very strongly with, you know, the likes of Lego or IKEA, Coca-Cola, Audi, you know, really being so resourceful, especially in the case of your examples for, you know, IKEA and Lego. And what do you have already in your house? How can brands, you know, really be useful and deliver on utility with what we already have? And I think we could probably say the same for media. What do you have? And I think Natalie Buerter referred to this in one of our initial presentations around, you know, look back in your archives. What have you got? What photography, what imagery do you have? Obviously that resonates at this time, but how can we be resourceful to really deliver to consumers and help support them in an authentic way at this time? But thank you for all those insights, really great. And as you mentioned, we've got a bit of time for questions and answers. I've seen a few come through. So we've got one, let me just have a look. I'd love to let you know who it is from. We've got Yvette Govender, who has asked a question about TikTok. Monique, would you like to just, if you have any sort of initial feedback on how TikTok's doing or utilized at this time, as certainly not a new, but maybe newer compared to the others digital platforms?
So, I mean, TikTok is fairly in its infancy, but we do have some insights, which I'm happy to share. So Paula, perhaps I can include a few slides for you and you can put that in the mailer. And the other thing is that there are huge influencers with massive followings on TikTok in South Africa. So I don't know how familiar everyone is with TikTok. It's certainly not something that I am part of, but there are definitely huge followings. So another avenue for fantastic influencer marketing.
That's great. I think we've got an upcoming session, the IAB Insights session on digital video, and we've got one of our IAB front row winners speaking, Matsadishi, and I've just had a look at her presentation, and you know, when she talks about video as a 20-year-old, you know, I'm 21, so I can't really speak now. As a 20-year-old, old joke, you can hear PK's laughing here. You know, as a 20-year-old, sort of, you know, early 20s, you know, it's really about live video and telling her story through live video, and how do brands engage with that, I think is just so important. So it'd be great to see those slides on any insights there. So thanks for that. We saw another question. I see another one coming through now. Why is my chat got to pop up? Hold on 1 second. There was a question around, I think it was the narrative statistics that we showed earlier. It was a great question. And there's sort of two parts, and maybe as the IAB, I can take a stab at the answer. but there was really just a question around the March stats being so high, with February having challenges with online consumption due to the sea cable disruption. But I think, before I get into any stats there, I think the most important thing to note is that, as per your presentation, Ashish's, and probably multiple Kantar presentations before this, people are looking to go to trusted sources of news at this point. So yes, frequency and duration is very high on social media and in all the digital platforms. But when you're looking for a consistent, trusted source of news, I think that's why we're seeing that, that spike in certainly newspapers and our sort of trusted online publishers. So I think I'll just leave that comment there, because let's get some time in for Monique and Ashish. If you've got any questions, there's still time, please share them. Maybe at this point I can ask Monique and Ashish if there's anything else you'd like to add before we close, anything in particular that you feel stood out in terms of media and the new normal, the silver bullet, the golden bullet, or anything that you'd like to close off with. You're good.
I think from my side, I've probably there's a lot, right? So there's so much that we get bombarded with in terms of questions, and I think so firstly, everyone's going through the same thing in terms of having to justify marketing and media budgets more strongly, and I think there is hope though. It's not all doom and gloom, and it's not, oh dear, if I cut media, then it's going to have a direct impact on sales. There's ways to optimize, so I think there is hope in there.
Great. I think maybe just to lead off of that for Ashish as well, we've got a question here on, if clients are struggling to balance the emergency need to obviously save and cut costs with the need to market, and sales can't necessarily follow that spend if one does choose and is able to spend on media. The question here is, if brands had to choose channels for performance, would that be wiser than distributing evenly? And that's from Danilo from Special Effects Media, i.e. is broad spend wiser than big spend on one platform? Maybe Ashish, you want to? Have I muted you again? Ashish, one second. Ashish, 1 second. There we go. It should just take a second. There we go.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry. I was speaking, then I realized that my voice is not going through. So yeah, I would say, like, again, the chart which I showed about the reach, relevance, and reaction. And if the brands have to make a choice, they have to look at, if your demand is there and you have a supply issue, right? Go from a relevance angle, and you can make choices. Because definitely, what I would not advise is to go for a reach-based medium, some mass reach-based mediums, and you have to make choices. So go for the reaction. So I would go more on the e-commerce side of things, more on the communications around performance media right now, rather than, because you do need a top line sales to kind of keep the funding coming in from your brand, right? So I would go with that principles rather than isolating out a particular channel, because every channel can be used in a very different way. But yes, performance channels like an e-commerce, some e-commerce, or where you can buy now buttons becomes quite prominent, and I would advise that.
Great, thank you, Ashish. And is there anything from your side that you'd like to add in closing for today?
Yeah, so my advice is that there are so many advices coming around, right, from different places and different part of the communication industry. And what I'm seeing is that the brands are in a very difficult spot, and during the lockdown, they have been closed, the shops have been closed, the sales have not been happening, and the cash flow issues there. And what I would just want to humbly request is that media does not really mean that you need to go full ballistic on one channel. And what I was talking about, like, go on a television campaign, big ideas and things like that. Just communicate. If you have a very simple messaging, keep on communicating, be it in the e-commerce space or be it in the relevance side of things. But please make sure that you are communicating. Do not go dark, and not necessarily that you have to have millions of brands to have a television campaign or a media campaign. There are a lot of other options, and just start thinking out of the box. So that would be my advice.
Great. Thank you, Ashish. And thank you to Monique. A really great session today. We do have 2 other questions here that we'll get back to via email. So thanks, Candice and Fatima. We'll get back to you offline. But just a big thank you to Kantar and to Monique Claassen and to Mediacom and Ashish for joining us today. The Zoom webinar video and the presentations will be available. We'll share those in the thank you mailer by latest tomorrow morning. And yeah, we hope to see you in our next session, and that'll be our 6th session. And we're hoping to look at customer experience. So sign up for that. The link is available. And yeah, have a fantastic Wednesday and keep safe. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.
Cheers, guys.
Bye, Monique. Bye, Ashish. Thanks.
Bye. Bye. Thanks.